Kia ora, Chris from NIWA here with a seasonal climate outlook. We're looking at the period of April through June, so we're sneaking into winter. Let's get to it. Here's what you need to know. I'll go away. Actually, I'll just be smaller here. So the headlines, an early April rain event. Some of this will be big-time rainfall, particularly for the west of the South Island. And even though when the rain does return, which it will, for some it may take longer than others, the effects of dryness, they can often persist a lot longer. So things green up, things start to appear to go back to normal, but in reality, the effects of dryness, so deeper into the soil, that dryness persists. So just keep that in mind. And for the most part, and for most of New Zealand, we are expecting a warmer than usual 3-month period. Yes, there'll be cool days and cool snaps, but our expectation is that, well, chilly weather is not going to define the period. Okay, then. What we're going to do is start off like we normally do. Before we go to the weather space, let's actually go to the temperature space for the next 3 months. Then we'll go back to what to expect over the coming days. As I said, some pretty good rainfall coming up. So I'm going to disappear, and there you go. So you can see above average temperatures. The areas in darker red. The exception, the western part of both islands. This is where we're giving about equal chances for temperatures to be either average or above average. So the confidence not quite so high there, so that's why we have kind of the two categories, somewhere in that spectrum of average to above average, whereas the rest of the country, we are thinking above average temperatures. Now look, even when above average temperatures occur, as I come back on screen, we are working through autumn and early winter. So that means even a warm day during the month of May or June is not going to be as warm as, say, a warm day in February or March, obviously. But nonetheless, we could sneak out a couple summer-like days, particularly in the month of April. And we could see some extra days where we want to be outside versus if you're not a fan of cooler temperatures, maybe you don't fire up the heater that much, at least early on during the next 3 months. And perhaps a slow start to skiing. We'll see. This is not the winter outlook, but hey, June is the winter season. And right now, if we have above average temperatures slated, then obviously does not bode exactly entirely well for snowfall. More on that as we work through the autumn season and get closer to winter. Anyway, rainfall expectations. Here we go. I'll disappear once again. Near normal for much of the country. There are a couple spots where we think above normal may occur, and the best chances for that, the eastern part of both islands and the top of the South Island, where they will get a big rainfall event as we work our way through the first few days of April, and that will go a long way of adding to the seasonal total. Just those few days of rainfall, that'll be a big impact in terms of rainfall amounts for the season as a whole. And you can see for the top of the South Island, beg your pardon, the top of the North Island, where it's been very dry, drought conditions, we are going to see a return to more normal rainfall, it appears, as we progress through the season. That is good news because drought conditions have are occurring. Places like Northland, Auckland, and the Waikato. Places like Taranaki, places like the Manawatu, where dryness and drought has occurred. Eventually, you too will see that rainfall become more regular as we progress through time. But as we said at the beginning, when dryness ends, the effects of dryness still may persist for several weeks beyond that. All right, so let's go to the next few days. What can we expect? So we start off with our pressure anomaly map. So this is for the first few days or so of April. And where you see the red, that's higher than normal air pressure, where that's favored. And where you see the blue, that's low pressure, lousy weather. And look at that. That's a big old low over the Tasman Sea. We are recording this on the first day of April. Happy April Fools. No joking here, though. This will be a big rain event. It'll tug down some pretty good moisture from the north. In fact, let me go to the relative humidity. This is kind of a proxy of, you can see the airflow. You can also see where the origin of the moisture is coming from. And you can see how that's clearly coming from those dark colors here, I guess the greens, the blues, the aquas. You can see that's coming from the tropics, the Coral Sea, and the subtropics. So that is the origin of the air. A lot of moisture with that, and that'll be the fuel for heavy rain for places like the top of the South Island, the western South Island, and parts of the North Island as well. That'll be Thursday and Friday, and even for some into Saturday for the upper North Island. So the end of the first week of April into the first weekend of April as we end daylight saving the first weekend of April. we are going to find a good drop of rain, some much needed rainfall. Let's go back to the pressure map. You can see as we zoom back out, that low will move south with time, and you can see how that kind of drifts south. But another low kind of reloads over the, I guess, Southern Ocean. And what this means is that we may see active weather for places like the western South Island for a few days as we work our way through that first week or so of April. That includes gusty wind and the threat of rainfall. But eventually, as we get toward the 9th and the 10th, you can see how the red returns to much of the country, particularly for the North Island. And that's high pressure. That's settled weather. So the narrative here, as you work your way through the first week of April, unsettled for much of the country, some areas getting some heavy rain. And then as we work our way toward the 8th, the 9th, and the 10th, kind of in that first, I guess, the first part of the second week of April, we're likely to see a return, at least for a period of time, of settled weather. One thing that's worth mentioning is that with that moist flow coming from the tropics and subtropics, it will be a warm flow. Look at this. You can really make out the connection with these temperature anomalies. So what you're looking at here, the red, this is warmer than usual temperatures, not so much at the ground, about 1,500 meters up or thereabouts. It gives us a good idea of the type of air that's going to be visiting us. And you can plainly see a lot of red over the country, and that makes sense given the airflow coming from the tropics. Eventually, as that shifts east, this is an atmospheric river, by the way. It's a river of moisture in the sky, bringing high level of moisture from the tropics into the higher latitudes, such as New Zealand. So as this river of moisture moves east, not only does the moisture go away, but so does the warmth, and eventually we see somewhat, I guess, cooler temperatures return by the end of the first week, and certainly as you work your way through week 2. With that settled weather coming in, some cooler temperatures. So this is an example of how the season may go, where warmth is favored, but we do get these periods of cooler temperatures, then we warm up again. But the warm days look to outweigh the cool ones, particularly for much of the country, barring the western part of both islands. I do want to show you what to expect in terms of rainfall for the next 5 weeks. Before that, let's go to our New Zealand Drought Index because this highlights areas that could really use the rain. Note we see dryness over much of the central portion of Otago near Queenstown and the lower western portion of the South Island. Also, you can see over near Greymouth and inland of, say, Westport toward the Buller area, we are seeing some unusually dry conditions. And then for the North Island, this is where things are quite dry. You can see over toward Taranaki, the Waikato, much of the Auckland and Northland region. In fact, let's zoom into these areas. You can see extremely dry to drought conditions in these areas from Hamilton, much of the Waikato, into the Auckland and over toward the Northland, especially western and southwestern Northland. Places like Dargaville have been really in a rainfall deficit over the past, not several months, but going back even to last year. So soil moistures are incredibly low. We really want the rain, and we're going to get some, as I said, but even when these colors disappear on the New Zealand Drought Index, it's worth repeating, the effects of that dryness, they're likely persist longer than what you see on the map in terms of coloring. So that is the state of play with dryness. Now let's talk about what to expect with rainfall over the next 5 weeks. So this is pretty good. So this is the 7-day period. Let's get our calendar straight. So this is the 30th of March. So this is saying the 7 days from the 30th of March. So this gets us to like the 5th or 6th of April. And as you would expect, there's a lot of green for the North Island and the upper and western South Island. The only places, the eastern parts, because of our north to northwest flow, they'll be sheltered and protected from the heaviest rain. They'll get some, just not as much as others will to the north and to the west. Then, as I showed you before, that high pressure builds in. So the 7 days from the 6th of April, basically week 2 of April, as we approach school holidays, looks like the start of school holidays looking pretty good. Dry weather, at least if you want to get outside from that perspective, for much of the North Island, that's normal or well below normal rainfall. Look, I know we want the rain to get the dryness down and the effects of dryness, but it's going to take some time. So this will, I guess we'll try to help out everyone. People will need the rain in the first week. Here in the second week, people want some dry weather for school holidays. We'll hook you up there. Eastern South Island looks to be a dry period as well. And for the rest of the South Island, that's neutral, so near normal rainfall for that 1 week, the week the 6th through the 13th, I beg your pardon. And then we start to see another change. So again, this is the 7 days from the 13th. So this takes us to about the 20th, the 13th through about the 20th of April. And we start to see the emergence of green in Northland, Coromandel, Bay of Plenty, Tarafa de Gisborne, even Auckland. This is an indication we got to watch to the north. Now look, as I said, we are recording this on April 1st. This will likely evolve and change. Perhaps the timing, perhaps the location, but the theme, the message is this. We need to watch maybe week 2 of school holidays for the potential of another rainmaker coming from the north. And whenever rainmakers come from the north, they carry with it oftentimes a lot of moisture, and that does increase the odds for a big rain event. Tough to say, but we are seeing these darker greens, so there is some credence to that thought. Now, for the South Island, before we move on, looks like week 2 of school holidays looking pretty stinking good in Dunners and Invercargill and much of Southland, perhaps interior and lower portions of Otago. Places like Nelson, the top of the South Island, and even toward Wellington, some wetness looks to be favored in that third week. Again, the 13th through the 20th of April. And then as we go to week 4, this is basically the last full week of April, the 21st to about the 28th. You can see how that signal for rainfall in the northern and eastern part of the North Island. And that's why, I'm going to see if I can jump around here. I'm going to call an audible, to use an American football term, go off script here. That's why, I'll disappear, we have the threat or the chance for above normal rainfall for eastern parts of both islands. We are expecting occasionally these northeasterly and easterly flows, and when they happen, that may tug moisture down from the subtropics and tropics, and eastern areas will be exposed to those types of airflow. So that's why, one reason why we have that lean toward potential wetness in those eastern areas. And just going back to the maps, so this is why, as we were showing earlier, that chance for above normal rainfall for the season, as we just showed you, for April, May, and June. While what we're seeing here in the last full week of April, the 21st to the 28th, you can see that signal for above normal rainfall for the eastern North Island and for the top of the North Island. So we could see more rain to end the month of April. And if it comes to the north, there is a risk for heavy rain. And same signal for the western part of the South Island. We see an opportunity for some potentially meaningful or heavy rainfall. Again, this is a theme. These may evolve and change the timing and the location, so we encourage you to go on NIWA 35. Just type in NIWA 35 into Uncle Google, and you'll be directed to that. It's updated every day around 2 or 3 in the afternoon. Let's just round things out real quick with the last week. So this takes us into early May, and a return to dryness potentially for much of the country. Certainly not a huge wet signal, more of a neutral or kind of flat, sort of flat. We do see some shades of brown from Christchurch to Dunedin, and in some places could be dry, quite dry for that week, and also maybe some dryness for the eastern part. We'll see. That's 5 weeks out. These things tend to evolve and change. All right, then. Let's go back. Let's see here. I do want to go back to, there's the outlook. We'll recap that real quick. Above normal temperatures for much of the country. Eastern areas make that western areas, I beg your pardon, of the west of the north, west of the south. About equal chances for temperatures to be average or above average as we work our way through the next 3 months as a whole. And in terms of rainfall, there you can see near normal rainfall for much of the country, about half the country actually, with the areas in that sort of turquoise or that greenish blue color. That is where above normal rainfall is possible, somewhere between above normal. Keeping in mind, once again, it's a spectrum, and we expect areas in these colored or shaded regions to land somewhere in there. Coming back on camera, now what we can do a bit of a nerd alert. Here it is, nerd alert time, one of my favorite parts. So, what's happening? You can see these are ocean temperatures, and ocean temperatures right here across the equatorial Pacific. I'm actually using green coloring. I'm not sure if I like that. Let's go to red. Yeah, that's a little better, isn't it? You can see the ocean temperatures are unusually cool in the central Pacific Ocean. What you can also see is that ocean temperatures are unusually warm. So put a plus sign here, I'll put a negative sign here, and a plus sign here. So this is telling us cooler than usual. This is telling us warmer than usual and warmer than usual. This is La Nina weakening. Watch this. As I clear this off, you can see how if we move things back to, say, early February, let's let that play through. You can see how the blue has become less blue, basically. It was a bit more profound, a bit more pronounced, and now that blue is fading away as ocean temperatures start to warm in the equatorial Pacific. In fact, as we bring things forward to the last day of March, you can see, and this is plainly see that this blue is going away. But the effects of that still are in the atmosphere. So we expect La Nina to transition to neutral over the coming 3 months. We also expect ocean temperatures to warm a bit more here, so that'll become less blue. That's one signal or one reflection of exiting La Nina and going to ENSO neutral. You'll also notice over the Tasman Sea and around New Zealand, ocean temperatures are unusually warm. This is important because as an island nation, our air temperatures and our ocean temperatures are closely related. To put differently, if ocean temperatures are running warmer than average, it's going to be difficult to get any sustained periods of cooler than usual weather. It can happen, but it's pretty hard to do. And the fact that we're seeing unusually warm temperatures around much of New Zealand, he said, is telling us that we are expected. That's one reason why we are expecting that warm lean for the next 3 months. Now we're going to get a little bit nerdier, and we're going to go to, where is it here? That's not it. We're going to go to our velocity potential. Let's see if I can dial this up. Here we go. That's, there it is. One of my favorite things. So why have we been experiencing dry weather? Well, it's because of this guy right here. You see this? So let's establish reality. Where you see the warm colors, this is where the air is favored to sink. And where you see the cool colors, such as right here, that is where the air is favored to rise. Why is this important? Because this basically has flow-on effects to airflow patterns down here in New Zealand. And for the past several months, this sink has been present due north of the country. And because of that, we really haven't had any influences from the tropics. We really haven't had any, that's not been our source of moisture. Our source of moisture has come from other places, and that can bring us rain, but it's irregular and usually not very profound. But change is coming. As we work our way through the coming months, look at this. Now, yes, in April, that sink is still there. But we're starting to see the emergence of some rising to our north. And as we get through May, then June, and July especially, into August, you can see how the rise, there's May, so this is rising air. You can see that sink is forecast to shove a little bit farther west toward Papua New Guinea, PNG, and then that sink is really forecast to be over Papua New Guinea, basically north of Australia. But we are starting to see a rise in this area around Fiji and to the east of Fiji, and that is forecast to grow July and August. So because of this, I do think there is reason to believe as we progress through autumn, and especially this is going beyond the next 3 months into July and August, I do think there is the potential to have a wet winter for parts of the country, especially the North Island, because we are going to see a change in basically the pattern where rising air and sinking air, where they're favored. And you can plainly see rising air is favored August and July. Now, we're going pretty far out there. So, again, you want to check back. These things do change. They can happen. But and this has been consistent for the past couple of months, this signal of rising air that's forecast to emerge over the Southwest Pacific. So this is something we'll be watching. You can see why, again, March, that sink to our north. But as you go through time, that's forecast to shift away. And we're starting to see a better chance for rainfall because of increased rising motion. So that is feeding in to our thinking. So once again, for the next 3 months, we are expecting Temperatures to be above average for much of the country, about equal chances for average or above average for the western parts of both islands. And for the North Island, we are expecting normal rainfall for northern and western parts. That's good news. It's been so dry, but remember that dryness will linger on. Got to watch it for some heavy rain the first few days, 4 or 5 days of April. Eastern areas of both islands and the top of the South Island, normal or above normal rainfall. We should mention, coming back on screen, we have normal rainfall for the South Island. They're going to have some wet periods over the next probably few weeks or so. The month of April could be some wetness. In fact, we are expecting wet weather for the month of April. But as northeast winds perhaps become a bit more common, that'll tend to favor dryness or reduction of rainfall for the west of the South Island. So it may start wet the next 3 months in April for the west of the South Island, but that should change, become a bit more, a bit drier as you work away into May and June. So that's it for me. If you want a complete read of the seasonal climate outlook, please head to niwa.co.nz. We'll see you next time. Namahi Nui.